Generate our motivation. And remember that if we practice the thought training, then no matter what circumstance we're in, whether it's favorable or unfavorable, whether we experience pleasure or pain, we'll be able to transform that situation into one in which we create virtue and in which we practice the path to awakening. And it's possible to do this because our unhappy situations or unfavorable situations all stem from the mind. And when we change the mind, we can change the results that we experience. And especially because if we observe closely, so much of our discomfort and dis-ease mentally is due to our afflictions, and our afflictions are based on distorted conceptions. And so because those conceptions are out of sync with reality, when we can see things in a more realistic view, even conventionally more realistic, let alone ultimately more realistic, then the force of the distorted conceptions declines. We can see things more clearly, and we realize that there is no I to be harmed and no inherently existent thing that is harming us. And so our whole experience changes. So all sentient beings are caught in this cycle of rebirth under the control of ignorance and all these distorted conceptions. And so our long-term aim is to free ourselves from the cycle, eliminate all obscurations on the mind stream, so that we can be of the greatest benefit to living beings and be able to help them while they're in samsara and eventually be able to lead them to awakening after we have attained awakening. So generate this long-term aspiration and determination, and see that what we're doing tonight is one drop in the bucket, one step on the path going in that direction. My marker is on page 109, but I thought we were on page, it's 109, not 107. Okay, because I forgot to. Okay, good. I forgot to move my little place marker last time. Okay, so 109, feelings that accompany afflictions. Okay, so afflictions are in the miscellaneous factors aggregate, and feelings are its own aggregate of feelings. And the word feelings here doesn't mean emotion like the way we usually use the word feelings in English. Rather, it means feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, or we could say happy, unhappy, suffering, joyful. Okay, so, and then of course neutral, neither. Yeah. So, feelings are just, the feeling aggregate contains just those feelings, but the feelings of happy, pain, pleasure, and neutral are also related to the afflictions, because depending upon the feelings, we usually react with an affliction in response. And then it goes the other way too, that when we have certain afflictions in our mind, they will create happy, unhappy, or neutral feelings. Okay. So, what the book says, previously we discussed one way in which feelings and afflictions are related, that polluted feelings easily provoke afflictions to arise. Okay, so when we say polluted feelings, those are feelings that arise under the influence of ignorance and the latencies of ignorance. Okay. And so these polluted feelings easily provoke afflictions. When we are unhappy, anger and malice may soon follow. True or not true? Yeah. Anybody here wouldn't feel happy when they get angry? Okay. Okay, so here feelings, in that case, that example, feelings are causes for afflictions. And for this reason, we are advised to maintain a happy mind. Okay, so I think I mentioned to you before that so many of my teachers say, when we go in to see them with our problems about this and that, they say, just have a happy mind. And we would usually look at them like, well, if I had a happy mind, I wouldn't be coming and asking for advice. Okay? But, what it points us to, because I've thought about this a lot, because many of my teachers have said that, is, how do we make ourselves have a happy mind? We can't just say, be happy when we feel miserable. Okay? When we look at the thought that is behind an affliction, and we realize that all of this really doesn't have much to do with reality, then if we can drop it, there's the possibility of having a happy mind. Okay. Now, why can't we just drop it? Because we are right, and my emotions, are right. They're the only possible thing any sane person in this universe would feel. And my emotions are mine. And if you just tell me to just drop it and be happy, you're not understanding me. You're not hearing me. Right? Is that how you react? Yeah. You aren't understanding me. You aren't hearing me. You're just, this is what's always going on between us, that you just dismiss my feelings and you don't care. Okay. We can play the drama pretty well. We've done it many times. Yes? Okay. And so, even we hear in Dharma teachings, you can, release an affliction. We say, oh, yes, that sounds very good, very wonderful. Yes, thought training practices are fantastic. I will definitely do them. My anger is not very unrealistic. I'm blaming people when it's not really their fault. And we say this when our mind is nice and calm. And as soon as a situation happens, we flip, and we are entrenched in our emotion. Okay. And not only are we entrenched in our emotion, but, like I said, we feel it's correct. How I'm feeling is correct. There is nothing in my mind that is exaggerated or unrealistic. Okay? Especially with anger. Yeah? When you're angry, are you ever wrong? Oh, goodness, no, never. Yeah. Well, we're never wrong. Yeah. And the solution is always very simple. Because we're right, because we're seeing the situation as an objective event out there, we're not projecting anything on it. It does this talk of inherent existence and distorted conceptions. That's what the other person is doing. But I'm seeing an objective reality. And it's the actual solution to our conflict is very simple. Yeah. I'm right, you're wrong, and you change. Yeah. You just realize how wrong you are, and you do things my way. See, it's very simple, because it's your mind that's distorted, not my mind. And then we come in and we hear Dharma teachings, and it's, oh yes, ignorant anger is based on self-grasping. Yes, that's true, and it's based on seeing things as permanent. That's true, and it's based on all these other exaggerations. That's true, yeah. But it's always the but, isn't it? Yeah. In the middle of the situation, our Dharma is out the window. Okay? Same thing with attachment, isn't it? Yeah. There's some person or some object, and, no big deal. Yeah. That red-hot sports car that you're getting when you have a middle-aged identity crisis. Yeah. Or that fantastic person that you've been waiting your whole life to meet. Yeah. So when you first meet them, no big deal. See the car, yeah, it's nice. Then you start thinking about it. Oh, that red sports car. If I rode a red sports car, then people would look at me in a certain way. And then that person, who after all, yeah, that's the kind of person I should be with to match the kind of job I have and the kind of person I am. Yeah, so yeah, they're pretty hot stuff. They and the sports car go together. Yeah. And then you have attachment, and you've got to go out and get the sports car, and you've got to go out and get that person. And then somebody, tells you come to a Dharma teaching, and you hear about, when you're attached to someone or something, there's exaggeration. You're projecting good qualities that aren't there. Or you're projecting that person, that situation or that object has the nature of happiness and is going to make you everlastingly happy. Forever. Like like we learned in the fairy tales when we were little. And then we go for it. And, nothing's wrong with my mind. I'm seeing everything totally accurately. Yeah. But if we were seeing everything totally accurately, then when we got all of our objects of attachment, we should be content and satisfied, not just in that moment, but forever, because that object has happiness in it. That other person has happiness in it. So when I get those, then I get the happiness. And as long as I, make it so I'm never separated from them, then it's good. Okay. What's your experience been when you get objects of attachment? Either possessions or people. Fantastic, you get the corner office or your version of the corner office. You get to go, you get the new skis, you get a raise, you get some certificate or honor, and, they announce your name somewhere. Yeah. How do you feel? Where's that cloud? Because I'm floating on it. Yeah, but there's no exaggeration in my mind. And if that were the case, why do those things never leave us completely satisfied? Yeah, that's a question we have to ask ourselves. Why are we never satisfied? Is it because something's wrong with the object? Yeah, so I just leave that object and go and get the latest model? Is that it? The new iPhone that has some, the old iPhone brought me happiness for a while, but now it's old. I want the new iPhone. Okay. Yeah, so if it has happiness, why are we always dissatisfied? Yeah. And are we going to spend our whole lives chasing all these things? Okay, so it's quite interesting, when your mind is just overwhelmed with I need, I want, I need. And sometimes that emotional need is really strong. I need love, I need appreciation, I need somebody to look at me and say some sweet words. And then we get that, and then, see, we're mentioning it doesn't fill the hole inside, does it? There's still the hole inside. Okay. So one thing the masters say is, it's really a great relief when you have some itchy something to scratch it. Whew, that's happiness. But wouldn't it be better not to have the itch? Okay. So rather than run around like a chicken without its head, looking for that object that's going to soothe the itch of attachment, what would happen if we got rid of attachment? If we didn't have the itch of attachment. Okay, so it's quite interesting, and I think very enlightening to look and see, ask ourselves, examine whether how we're thinking of an object is actually accurate and is actually the qualities that that object has. Yeah. What we're painting, very beautiful, is that person or object or situation really that beautiful? What we're painting as so awful, is it really that awful? Or what about the distorted conceptions, the exaggeration in our mind? Because remember, when we define either attachment or anger, both of them begin with, arising due to inappropriate attention or distorted conception. And in the case of attachment, that overestimates the good qualities of the object. And in the case of being upset or angry, overestimates the badness of the object. Yeah, so right away in the definition of attachment and anger, it's telling us that there's something that is not very realistic going on, because there's exaggeration. But hey, we believe the exaggeration and we feel so good. Okay, so maintain a happy mind. If we can drop the attachment, drop the anger, the jealousy, the arrogance, whatever, then the mind is peaceful. Yeah. Getting whatever it is that affliction is craving does not make the mind peaceful. Or it may satisfy something for a moment, but the moment after that, the mind is not peaceful. Okay? You get this, you get your new iPhone, whenever they release. I was in New York one time when they released some new iPhone, and we walked past the iPhone store, and the line was going all the way here and around the block. These people waiting in line to get the latest iPhone, and I'm going, I'm so happy I don't have a phone. So you get your phone, but then you're back where you started from. Yeah, you get whatever it is you're craving, and then you're back where you started from. Okay, you retaliate when somebody hurts you, and then you're back at still feeling angry and hurt. Okay, so maintain a happy mind. Release whatever the mind's holding. In the second way that feelings and afflictions are related, they are simultaneous. That is, feelings accompany afflictive mental states. So attachment in the desire realm is accompanied by pleasant feeling. Yeah? You get what you want, pleasant feeling. Anger and animosity are accompanied by unpleasant feeling. This may be one reason why we are less willing to apply the antidotes to attachment. Because when there's attachment, we feel happy. So who wants to apply an antidote? Yeah, let's just enjoy the happiness. When we're angry, okay, we may try an antidote, but we'd much rather retaliate. But sometimes we're unhappy enough to try an antidote. One of the emotions that I find particularly painful is jealousy. Yeah, I don't know about you, but when jealousy arises in my mind, it's like, I want to apply an antidote because this mental state is just too awful. I don't want to stay in this. Okay, so you may have your own special, particularly awful affliction. Okay, so So any of these three feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, may accompany ignorance. So mental happiness and mental unhappiness may accompany wrong views. If someone believes non-virtuous actions have no result, he is happy. I can go get my revenge and there's no negative karma created. I'm happy. But if he thinks virtuous actions bring no result, he's unhappy. I was generous, but it's not going to bring any good result for me. Why did I give that away? Okay. So mental unhappiness accompanies doubt, okay, because being indecisive is unpleasant. Is that true? Is it unpleasant for you being indecisive? Yeah. Will you stay in a state of indecisiveness a long time? Why? Why do we stay in doubt and indecisiveness?
Because of attachment to my idea of there being one right thing or the best source of happiness. And so I'll stay in that unpleasant spot of trying to figure out what is the one right way, what is the one source of happiness that I'm trying to get.
Yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it? We stay in a mental state in which we are unhappy because what we're looking for is the thing that will give us the greatest amount of happiness. And, we don't want to choose something that will bring the second greatest amount of happiness when we could have chosen the one that brings the greatest amount. So we'd much rather stay on the fence and be miserable. It's quite reasonable, isn't our mind reasonable and realistic? Or are we a bit nuts? Okay. One thing I know for myself, studying the afflictions and looking, examining them in my mind, is I learned that, my mind is not very in touch with reality, even though I think it is. And it's rather shocking when you really think about it. Really shocking and horrifying to see how much we believe what we think and our emotions. Yeah. When most of it is just made up garbage. It's our own version of the big lie. Mm-hmm.
Or I have a different version actually, like Venerable Lamsel, from Venerable Lamsel is rather, I have a lot of experiences with self-doubt and trying to figure out a solution with the support of the environment, trying to figure out the answer from outside rather within. And I know some people who have the same problem, they have no access to the inner world, no confidence within, and so making that decision, being doubtful for years after years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The joy of being neurotic. Yeah. Stay in that state of constant dissatisfaction. Okay. A happy feeling accompanies arrogance and the other four afflictive views. When we're arrogant, we're happy, aren't we? Look at me. I'm so good. I got an Olympic medal. They all hold their thing. I have an Olympic medal. Oh, some of them you watch. Well, that's what they're doing. My Olympic medal. Yeah? Does that make you a good human being? Does that make you feel fulfilled inside? I mean, it's lovely to watch all these people be happy, because they've worked so hard and they trained so much. And so they actualized what they got. It's lovely to see them happy. But what are you happy about? I can swim faster than somebody else. I can throw, what's that spear-like thing?
Javelin.
What?
Javelin.
Javelin? I thought a javelin was round.
That's the disc.
That's the disc. Well, I can throw something further than everybody else, or whether it's a javelin or a disc or, the shot put. Okay, I'm just practicing with the logs in the forest, That's enough for me. But you look, and just the emotion around where that ball is, or the badminton little thing, What? Birdie. Shuttlecock? Birdie? I don't know, that thing. Like, where is it? Because I got to hit it. And where is that soccer ball? And where is that softball? And I got to make sure it's here and not 2 inches there. It's got to be right exactly here in between the goalposts. It cannot be there. Yeah? And the basketball, like, yeah. Because if I can make this basket and my team wins, then Nike is going to give me a whole lot of money to advertise its shoes. And in addition, I'll have this. Does each player get a gold medal or just the team? Each player? From experience. Yes? Okay, so arrogance, we are happy, aren't we? We're better than somebody else.
Oftentimes, for me, when arrogance arises, it's mixed. It's tainted with a little bit of, it doesn't feel so good.
Mm-hmm.
There's gloating, but it's not completely happy.
What doesn't feel good when you're feeling arrogant?
I know there's something fishy about it.
Self-doubt?
Arrogance has a kind of smell to it, doesn't it? It's a little stinky. It's just not pure happiness.
But attachment is? That's what we think, isn't it? Attachment brings pure happiness, pure joy.
Well, but attachment has giddiness with it, and that's what we identify, I think, as real happiness. It's that excitement and giddiness, but I don't get that with arrogance often.
Okay. How about other people? How do you feel when arrogance is there?
I was thinking with attachment that can have anxiety about losing the object or not getting it.
Yeah, that comes, you have the attachment and the happiness, then that gives way to the anxiety.
Okay.
And the unpleasantness of the anxiety.
And arrogance can have an underlying lack of confidence going on that can be a more subtle form of misery that's present there.
Yeah.
I think arrogance is at the expense of somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm better than him or her or them. And I think that's what gives the feeling.
We feel a little bit guilty.
Not so nice. Yeah.
I had a similar thought that there's shades of arrogance. I mean, there's many different types, right? But there's shades. So if it's kind of subtle and you just feel a little puffed, that's happy. But once that, in the Lion of Pride, when the first Dalai Lama, I think, is talking
Yeah.
about the lion of contempt. That contempt mind has anger in it too. I mean, or that judgmental mind comes as a piece of it, and then that's
Right.
not so nice.
But you have to differentiate all the different mental states. You start out with arrogance, then the arrogance stops, and you get the contempt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have to look at how the different mental states, different afflictions relate to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because sometimes we go from one to the next, and that's why we think it's all one, but it actually can be several different mental states.
Best arrogance is when you don't even know you're being arrogant. It's like completely not in your radar at all. You just think
true.
you're being you, and this is how it is, and I'm smart, and I'm pretty, and I'm rich, so blah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And then when somebody tells you that you're conceited, you're like, what? Yeah. I remember the first time in 6th grade. Yeah, I talk about 6th grade a lot. Somebody told me I was conceited in 6th grade, and I was like, no, I'm not conceited. Totally out to lunch. I'm just like smart, so. I can't add the pretty one on, but the smart one, okay, yeah, so. What?
And the rest of you aren't.
The rest?
As she said, and the rest of you are not.
Oh. That came on.
That comes after.
Yeah, that comes after. First is I'm smart, mom and dad are happy. Okay, mom and dad are happy. Then comes, the other people aren't so smart. So that makes me even smarter. Yeah. No, then I felt so bad, and I thought, oh, nobody's going to like me if I'm conceited. So then I started trying to act non-conceited. I didn't drop my conceit. I just tried to not act so conceited. Because I wanted people in 6th grade to like me. Yeah. Do you remember 6th grade? Yeah. Didn't you desperately want everybody to like you? Yeah. Okay. Okay, a happy feeling accompanies arrogance and the other 4 afflictive views. However, if the mind of a person in the desire realm is unclear, all 10 root afflictions are accompanied by a neutral feeling. Okay, because if the mind's unclear, none of the afflictions are going to be real strong at that point. The Pali Abhidhamma says that all consciousnesses rooted in anger are accompanied by mental unhappiness. That means that whenever our minds are unhappy, anger is present, even at a subtle level, and this mental state is non-virtuous. Actually, there's no pervasion there. Yeah, that if you're unhappy, no, that means that whenever we are, there's no pervasion that when we are unhappy. Yeah, well, it says that all consciousnesses rooted in anger are accompanied by mental unhappiness. That doesn't mean all consciousnesses experiencing mental unhappiness are angry. Okay, but I remember, reading this and writing to Bhikkhu Bodhi and asking him, does that mean that whenever our minds are unhappy, anger is present? And he said yes, because I was really horrified by that, to think about that. And then, when I do think about that, if I'm angry, or if I'm unhappy, am I ever satisfied? Am I ever? Yes?
What about when we're sad? We're not happy then, but that's not necessarily anger.
Well, see, that's the tricky thing. It's not anger, but there could be some aversion to the feeling, some pushing away and rejection of the feeling. Yeah.
I tend to think unhappiness is a subtle kind of anger. If I'm unhappy with the weather, if I'm unhappy because of all this smoke in the air, it's like, that's a kind of aversion. I don't like that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm unhappy. So there is and I was also thinking about Shantideva, I can't remember the exact words, but close to the beginning of chapter 6, he talks about anger finds its fuel in an unhappy mind.
In unhappiness,
So
right?
I think it's like when your mind is unhappy, it's just kind of on the verge of...
Yeah, it goes to anger very easily. Yeah. And it can be, like you said, a subtle kind of anger. We're annoyed, we're irritated, we have aversion. Doesn't mean we're raging. Yeah. Okay. But then to think that whenever I'm unhappy, I'm creating non-virtue, that is a big motivator to get out of that unhappy mental state with anger, because, who wants to sit and create non-virtue? Yeah?
Yeah, it's just exactly like we were speaking about metta today, and for me that it was exactly a practice who made that very visible. How, when I'm actually not in that friendly state, there is actually, the other state is kind of aversion. It's kind of a no. Can be very subtle, but there's some kind of a no.
Yeah. Yeah, a no.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what we call a bad mood.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember in the Mind and Life conferences one time, this is a long time ago, that somebody asked, well, what about moods? Yeah. And are moods afflictions? What are our moods feelings? What are moods? There wasn't a clear answer, but it really, it makes me think about it. And very often, moods, there's some kind of, there may be a subtle feeling and a subtle affliction, both of them together. And I'm not quite sure what causes what. Yeah. But, when you wake up in a bad mood, so there's unhappiness, and then there's also, you're grumpy. Yeah. So it seems like moods might be low levels of afflictions. You wake up in a bad mood, you're grumpy, but if you don't take care of that mood and that unhappiness, then you could really, you go to work and you start screaming or whatever. Yeah. Or you don't wait until you go to work to scream. Okay. Where were we? Okay. To the contrary, virtuous mental states are accompanied by either a happy feeling or equanimity. Consciously steering our thoughts so that they are constructive brings not only happiness or equanimity, but also creates virtuous karma. When we act with genuine generosity or ethical restraint, our mind is happy here and now, and we create the cause for happiness in the future. I think the key word there is genuine. Okay? When we really give with an open heart and because we want to give, then our mind is happy giving. When we give because we feel obliged or we're afraid people will look down on us and call us a cheapskate or whatever, then we may give, but the mind is unhappy. So I think that, it's really here when we act with genuine generosity, or the same with ethical restraint. If we, there's a situation we're tempted to go in, act in a deluded way, and we say, whoa, I'm going to stop myself. And then afterwards you go, that was good, I'm glad that I didn't do that. Then, this is genuine ethical restraint. You feel content afterwards. But if you're keeping precepts and you go, oh God, all my friends are going out to drink and I can't go drink with them because I have this precept. So you restrain yourself from doing the action, but you're actually unhappy and angry about it. That's because it's not genuine from the heart restraint. It's, we're doing a guilt trip on ourselves. Anybody here do guilt trips? Oh, just a few people. Oh, that's just a few of you. Oh, yeah. Two people raised their hand. Oh, very good. Very good. Of course, when training in these practices, we may not be continually happy because afflictions sometimes interfere. But as we continue to practice, afflictions will wane and virtue and joy will increase. And that's true, as we really train the mind and see the benefit in creating virtue and abandoning non-virtue, then our mind becomes much happier. Yeah. Of the auxiliary afflictions and variable mental factors that become non-virtuous. Okay, so those auxiliary afflictions and variable mental factors, okay, that become non-virtuous. Regret, jealousy, belligerence, harmfulness, resentment, and spite are accompanied by mental unhappiness. True? Yeah, you don't say, oh, I feel so good today. I think I'm going to go be belligerent. Yeah. Okay, miserliness, being an aspect of attachment, is accompanied by a pleasant feeling. I'm holding on to it. But then that very easily goes into another emotion of I'm miserly and selfish, and I don't, it's awful being like that. I hope nobody notices, but on the other hand, I am glad that I'm able to keep this thing and not give it away. Do you ever feel like that? Huh? Okay, either mental happiness or unhappiness may accompany deceit, pretension, concealment, and sleep. Because when those four mental factors do not accomplish the purpose that is their object, the mind becomes unhappy. Okay? So when you want to deceive somebody and pretend not to have faults that you have, but you don't succeed in convincing somebody of that, then you're really down. Or you want to pretend you have good qualities that you don't have, but you don't succeed, then that's a bummer. Okay? A concealment, you want to conceal your faults. Yeah, we're at Soja, Posada, and conceal the fault, and then somebody says, oh, but didn't you do da-da-da-da-da? And it's like, yeah. Okay, so unpleasant feeling arises. And sleep, when sleep doesn't accomplish your purpose. Yeah, you're exhausted and you want to rest, and you sleep and you wake up more tired. Huh? Okay, haughtiness is usually accompanied by happiness, although above the third dhyana, neutral feeling is present. Lack of integrity, inconsideration for others, lethargy, and restlessness may be accompanied by any of the 5 feelings: physical and mental happiness, physical and mental unhappiness, and neutral feeling. And the neutral feeling may accompany any of the afflictions. For example, if the affliction is not very strong. So it's good. I'm not making examples of all of these, but, afterwards go back and go through this and make examples of, for lethargy, when you feel mental unhappiness or physical unhappiness, things like that, okay? Very helpful to make your own examples. There is no physical or mental unhappiness in the form and formless realms. So when you have these very deep states of samadhi, your mind doesn't tend to, physical or mental unhappiness. Because the samadhi, to gain those states of samadhi, you have to have suppressed the gross afflictions. So when the gross afflictions are suppressed, then they don't make your mind unhappy. Okay, and so the afflictions in the form and formless realm are ethically neutral because they are weak. Of the dhyanas, the first 3 are accompanied by the feeling of bliss, which is a type of happy feeling, and the 4th by a neutral feeling. So formless realm absorptions are accompanied by only neutral feeling. So what's interesting is that neutral feeling is often seen to be more fulfilling than happy feeling. Because in happy feelings, even with these states of dhyana or concentration, where you still have the happy or blissful feeling, there's, this thing about giddiness. The mind isn't peaceful. There's some, tension in there. Whereas at the 4th dhyana, then that giddiness, that edge on the happiness is gone, and it's neutral feeling, which is more satisfactory, apparently. Okay, okay. Then the reflection for this. Okay, first step, practice identifying the various virtuous and non-virtuous mental factors as they arise in your mind. So this can keep you busy for a while. If you ever get bored, okay, Buddhism does not make you bored. There's always something to look at in your own mind. Okay, and then so identify the different, mental states, what's virtuous, what's not, as they arise in your mind. And then second, observe the feelings that accompany each one. And then third, how does the feeling of happiness that arises with attachment to sensual objects differ from the happiness that accompanies generosity or genuine affection and care? So that's a good question. What are the different feelings of happiness when you're attached versus when you're being genuinely generous, or when you have genuine care for somebody that's not based on attachment? Yeah, the feelings of happiness and contentment are quite different, aren't they? Yeah. With attachment, you're happy, but there's this this kind of quality to it, isn't there? I want more. I want better. I don't want to lose this. It is exhausting. Yeah. Okay, then the next section is the ethical dimension of afflictions. Ooh, they have ethical dimensions. Not all afflictions are non-virtuous. By themselves, ignorance, view of a personal identity, and view of extremes are neutral. Okay, they are not non-virtuous because by themselves they lack the capacity to produce pain. Okay, it's when ignorance or view of a personal identity or the view of the extremes is in a consciousness that is accompanied by some other affliction that then it becomes non-virtuous. Yeah, and in addition, these three do not always give rise to non-virtuous mental states. So what is an example of ignorance arising and it not giving rise to a non-virtuous mental state? Yeah, when you do a virtuous action. So you can still have ignorance or view of a personal identity that is grasping at the inherent existence of yourself or the object or the action when you're doing a virtuous action. Okay? So that's why, those grasping minds are not necessarily non-virtuous. By themselves, they're neutral. Okay. The treasury of knowledge speaks of mixed and unmixed ignorance. Okay, so this is from the Vaibhasika viewpoint. Mixed ignorance assists and accompanies the other 5 root afflictions and shares 5 similarities with them. Okay, so this is an example of ignorance in a consciousness with the any of the other 5 root afflictions. Okay, so they share 5 similarities. So they depend on the same cognitive faculty. So, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind. They have the same object. They're generated in the same aspect of that object. They occur at the same time, and they have the same entity. And the footnote says, see the Foundation of Buddhist Practice, Chapter 3. And that gives you more about what the 5 similarities are. Okay. So ignorance shares the same primary consciousness with all of the root and auxiliary afflictions. Okay, an example is the ignorance that shares a primary consciousness with attachment. This ignorance, as well as the primary consciousness and other mental factors in that whole assembly, become non-virtuous by the power of attachment being non-virtuous. Okay, so what we're talking about here, primary consciousness is a consciousness that just knows the basic nature of the object. Okay, so a visual consciousness sees sights, auditory consciousness hears sounds, olfactory consciousness smells, a gustatory consciousness tastes, tactile consciousness feels heat, cold, hunger, thirst, these kinds of things. And then the mental consciousness, can experience all of those. Yeah. When ignorance, okay, I'm trying to think according to Vaibhasika. For the Prasangika, ignorance would not accompany any of the 5 sense consciousnesses, only the mental consciousness. And it's probably the same way for the Vaibhasikas. Or do they? Did they say?
I remember that they do say that attachment and anger can accompany the five sense consciousnesses.
Five senses.
So probably the same is true for ignorance.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because according to the Prasangika, all these other afflictions are conceptual minds, so they would only be by the mental consciousness. Yeah. But we don't feel, when we have anger or attachment or jealousy or pride, we don't feel like that's a conceptual consciousness, do we? Yeah. We think this is, it's in my bones, we feel it. But it's a conceptual consciousness, meaning that there's thought behind it. There's some kind of thought, story, expectations, something misconstruing the situation. Okay. So when you have the primary consciousness and ignorance accompanies with it, and one of the other root afflictions is also there with that, in that same mental state, and they all share these five similarities, then that mental state is, if it's, there's an affliction of anger or hatred, that makes the whole mental state negative, non-virtuous. Yeah. If there's goodwill, then it can make the whole mental state virtuous, even though there's ignorance in that. So that's mixed ignorance. Okay. Then there's unmixed ignorance, and it doesn't share the five similarities with any of the non-virtuous afflictions and is ethically neutral. Okay, so examples of unmixed ignorance are the ignorance accompanying the view of a personal identity, the view of the extremes, and the ignorance mistaking a pen for a stick. Okay, so none of those, they're unmixed because the ignorance doesn't share those five qualities with an affliction. Okay, that the ignorance. So here we see there's many different kinds of ignorance. Yeah, the ignorance that is the first of the 12 links of dependent origination is unmixed ignorance. Okay, so that ignorance is the first link is neutral. Yeah. Then depending upon what other mental factors arise, that neutral mind of ignorance can phase into a non-virtuous mind, which creates negative karma. It can phase into a virtuous mind, which creates positive karma. Okay. But that first link itself, which is what we want to cut, is itself neutral. That's interesting, isn't it? Because we usually think root of ignorance, that must be really non-virtuous. I want to clobber that one. But it's ethically neutral. But being ethically neutral doesn't mean it's okay. It's still incredibly dangerous because under the influence of that ignorance, we can generate a lot of non-virtue by the ignorance stimulating a non-virtuous mental factor. Okay, so when this first link, ignorance, when it gives rise to anger, greed, or any other non-virtuous mental factor, this new mental state, is no longer the first link. Okay, so you have ignorance arise, and then you think, I want to give a gift, and I feel really good and happy about it, and so then you have a mental state, that is a virtuous one, due to, the mental factors of non-attachment and a feeling of generosity and care and so on. Okay, that new mental state is not the first link. It's also not the second link. It's link 1.5 somewhere. Okay, they don't really give it a number, but it's somehow between those. Okay, so this new mental state is accompanied by ignorance and is non-virtuous if it gives rise to anger, greed, pride, jealousy, something like that. So it is non-virtuous due to the power of the other afflictions that accompany it. It leads to a non-virtuous formative action that is the actual second link. Okay, so ignorance then stimulating a virtuous or non-virtuous mental factor, which makes that whole mental state virtuous or non-virtuous. And then by the power of that will give rise to virtuous or non-virtuous karma. And so that's the second link of formative action. Okay. Yeah. And so those are, at the beginning of every cycle of the 12 links. Ignorance and formative action. Formative action means karma. Okay. And it's a special kind of karma because it's the karma that is strong enough to throw a rebirth. Not all karma are the second link. Okay, it has to have the power, be strong enough to go throw you into another, propel you into another rebirth. All afflictions of the desire realm are non-virtuous, except unmixed ignorance, view of a personal identity, and view of extremes, which are neutral. All afflictions of the upper realms, the form and formless realms, are neutral. A degree of intensity is needed for an affliction to be non-virtuous. Since the afflictions of beings in the upper realms are refined, they lack the intensity required to create non-virtuous karma that ripens into painful experiences. Okay, so when after you're born in the formless or formless realm, you're not going to be actively creating negative karma. But after your karma to be born there expires, then due to previously created negative karma, you're going to probably fall down. This is all very technical, and requires some concentration and making examples of it. But it's talking about our own experience. And so for that reason, it's helpful to learn it and think about it as a tool to understanding our experience. To apply this to the Prasangika view, now it's going to get more complicated, because that was the Vaibhasikas. Now the Prasangikas are the good guys. Okay, we want to be on their team. They got the gold medal. Okay, so according to the Prasangikas, the first link, ignorance, that precedes a virtuous formative karma, such as generosity, is unmixed ignorance, that grasps the agent, object, and action as inherently existent. So grasping at something as inherently existent in and of itself is not non-virtuous, but it sets the stage. Okay, but it can also set the stage for a virtuous mental factor arising. Like you can, an example would be, I'm being generous, and there's this big feeling of I'm being generous. I'm really working hard to overcome my generosity. Okay, there's self-grasping there, but it's a virtuous mental state. You're rejoicing at your own virtue. Okay, so that unmixed ignorance that grasps the agent, object, and action as inherently existent is ethically neutral. This ignorance gives rise to a virtuous mental state, such as compassion, that motivates the constructive action of generosity, which is the second link. During the time of giving the gift, grasping inherent existence may continue, because you're thinking you, the gift, and the action are inherently existent, or we may simply apprehend ourselves, the offering, and the recipient without grasping them as either inherently existent or non-inherently existent. Okay? In the former case, grasping them as inherently existent, the mental state grasping inherent existence is neutral, and it is a different mental state than the one that is generous, which is virtuous. So in that case, you have the ignorance in one mental state and the generosity in the next mental state. They're not together in the same one. Okay? Usually there are ways in which they say that virtuous mental states can grasp inherent existence, but we're going to get into that in volume 9, and we're only in volume 3 right now. Okay. So, okay, so in the former case, the mental state grasping inherent existence is neutral and is a different mental state than the one that is generous, which is virtuous, and that comes subsequent to the neutral one. Although the two mental states are closely related in time, they do not occur simultaneously. Okay, we're done with that section. Yes. Uh-huh.
I seem to remember that according to Prasangika, ignorance is never simultaneous with afflictions like attachment and anger.
Yeah, in general it isn't, but in volume 9, when we get there.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
But so then I was thinking that in that case, ignorance would always be unmixed.
Yeah, if it isn't, what does
until
it say
we get
here?
to volume 9.
Huh? What?
Well, until we get to volume 9. Yeah, because unmixed ignorance means ignorance that is not simultaneous
right.
with one of the afflictions like anger.
Right.
And so if, according to Prasangika, ignorance can never be simultaneous with anger. It gives rise to anger, but it's no longer
in general, that's the case.
In general. So that means in general.
In general. Whenever you say in general, unmixed. It gives you an out.
Yeah.
Okay. So in general, yes, it is like that ignorance is not simultaneous with the other one. But there's a special kind of thing. I don't want to explain it now because it's kind of strange, and I don't want to make a mistake, explaining it. I'd rather go over.
Can you say that mixed ignorance is not a Prasangika term or view?
Let's just leave it with what I said.
Okay.
Okay?
You can't say that.
And then when we get to volume 9, then we can, look at the other things, okay? Because I don't want to guess when I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, but maybe check up yourself. Also, what's interesting is sometimes ignorance gives rise to grasping a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, and that gives rise to an affliction or to a virtuous state. There's also that. Okay, page 112. Are you asking a question about that? Yeah, what's your question?
So if ignorance gives rise to a neutral mental state and a neutral action, then it's not the first link because that's not
Right.
going anywhere.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Or if the anger or the generosity is very weak, then it's not strong enough to produce the second link. You might remember when we studied karma at the end of volume 2, then, it was saying that the karmas that have the power to throw a rebirth or propel a rebirth have to have all 4 parts complete. And if all 4 parts aren't complete, then it may be a completing karma or, cause some other kind of result. Okay. Counterforces to the afflictions. Okay. So whether we follow a religion or not, we can see that afflictions interfere with our personal happiness as well as the well-being of society in general. I love this, how His Holiness will talk about something incredibly detailed and technical, and then talk about something that we all understand in the next breath. Yeah, and then go back to the detail, and then go. Okay. So most harmful events among individuals, groups, or nations are rooted in ignorance and motivated by hatred, greed, arrogance, jealousy, and so forth. These afflictions are the causes of killing, robbery, sexual abuse, political and financial scandals, prejudice, injustice, and inequality. So all of our social problems come from the original thing is ignorance and the non-virtuous afflictions. Okay, the whole thing is completely. When you look at all the problems that what everybody's discussing in the paper and all the things that need to be done in society, why are there all these disturbing things going on? Because of the afflictions. Why can't, Congress get things together, or why can't the UN negotiators get things together? Because of afflictions. Yeah, it's just very clear. Problems in society, including our institutional structures, are rooted in people's afflictive mental states. Although this is the case, when we face personal or societal problems, we seldom look in our minds for the source of the problems. It is time that we do. The law of the land punishes people engaged in harmful actions in an effort to stop such behavior. Although punishment may make someone so uncomfortable or fearful that they temporarily stop a certain behavior, it does not bring about lasting change. That's the same for kids, if you beat a kid or make a kid terrified, they do what you want, but it's not going to be lasting change. Yeah. Because there's no wisdom involved in it. Real change comes due to our wisdom, not because of social pressure or fear of punishment or something like that. Okay, so that doesn't bring about lasting change. Lasting change comes only from changing our mental attitude. Unless the deeper source of harmful activities is eliminated, they will continue in one form or another. We need to identify the source of problems, which lies in the unsubdued mind, and employ preventative and remedial measures to tame our minds. This involves learning about the faults of afflictions and techniques to counteract them, applying these counterforces to our own minds, and then sharing them also with others. This can be done without using Buddhist vocabulary or religious concepts. It is common sense. And this is part of the beauty about Buddhism, is that if you've really learned it and thought about it and applied it to your own mind, then you can talk about all these kinds of things in just ordinary language that anybody can understand. We don't have to use Buddhist jargon. Okay, let's pause here. Are there any questions?
So there seems to be an emphasis on how destructive and non-virtuous anger is, and that when we're unhappy, it could be rooted in anger and then it's non-virtuous. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't sound like there's the same for attachment, although anger is rooted in attachment. Mm. So we could be happy and be creating a lot of non-virtue as well. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question is, are they equal karmic weight? Mm. I mean, are they equally virtuous? Okay.
The thing with anger is when we're angry, it not only plants non-virtuous seeds of non-virtue in our mind, just like attachment does, but anger does another thing, which it destroys the seeds of virtue. Okay? Attachment doesn't destroy the seeds of virtue. Anger does. And you can feel that in your mind, when you get really, really, really angry, and then, when you begin to come out of it, it's like, yeah, gee, what happened was not so good. And yeah, I mean, you can feel that you not only put negative imprints in, but you destroyed some that were already there. Mm-hmm.
My follow-up is then my mind flips and says, oh, well, it's better to be attached than get angry. Like better to get the object of attachment than to not get it and be angry about it.
That sounds really good. Yeah, I like that one. Let's all go out and get our objects of attachment, because otherwise we'll get angry, and, anger's worse. Yeah. That sounds really good. Okay, class ended. Let's go. Yeah. Huh? Oh, yes, and we'll be patriotic because it's helping the economy, I mean, there were more jobs. The economy is looking good. There was a good new jobs created in July. And we can really add to it by going out and consuming. No, I will fight for my object of attachment. No, I have virtuous anger. Righteous, virtuous anger. Because it's virtuous, because otherwise it'll be non-virtuous, like he said. So if I fight to get my object of attachment, that's good anger. Yeah. Righteous, virtuous. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going to head to Spokane and stand in line to get a new cell phone. That's really fun. Yeah, standing in line for a new cell phone. Yes.
Beginning of the section tonight. So the book is talking about polluted feelings easily provoking afflictions. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
And then it says the second way is that there's simultaneous feelings accompany afflictive mental states.
Yeah.
So what's the trigger though? There still has to be a trigger if they're happening simultaneously. Is it contact then?
Maybe the mental state has a slight head on the feeling.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah. Maybe there's the mental state when it's just itsy, teeny weeny, and then when you actually get it. So itsy, bitsy, teeny weeny bit of attachment produces the next moment when you have great attachment and you're happy. Something like that. You can put that on the Geshe list. Yes.
I'm still not clear about the sadness thing. When somebody said, I always thought that there's a basis of anger below.
When they say what?
When there's sadness, I always was, from my own experience, I always discovered anger below. But from the talk before, I heard that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I think there's different kinds of sadness. There's, it makes sense to me that there would be some, very easily could be anger below the sadness, or that the sadness provokes the anger because you're attached to something, then you can't get it or you lose it. Okay, so then you're upset and angry about that, and then, you're unhappy at the same time. But maybe there's other kinds of sadness, like, when you're sad for somebody else had some misfortune, and you don't have righteous anger, but which is a code word for anger that you don't want to admit as anger. But there's sadness, but you're not really angry about it. You accept the situation. Yeah.
I read a story of a Lama sobbing after meditating on the sufferings of beings in hell. How is this compassion a pleasant feeling?
The unpleasant feeling is a reaction to the suffering. Compassion knows that suffering doesn't have to exist. So I don't think that compassion necessarily starts out as a pleasant feeling. But if you have real compassion, there's a sense of hope and optimism in it. Because you know that suffering arises because of causes, and it's possible to stop those causes. It's not like, I'm compassionate, I really do, I'm looking at people suffering and I have compassion for them. No, it's not that kind of happiness. Yeah.
Did Westerners have emotional needs that the Tibetans you met didn't have? Are emotional needs a result of ignorance and affliction? When you have an emotional need, how do you work with it?
I think in general, yes. Emotional needs. Well, His Holiness talks about this in different ways, because he says we are social creatures. And so, we're social creatures. So wanting contact with other living beings is kind of very natural. Yeah. Now, if you really dig deep about that, would be, if we were free of ignorance, would we even be born with these kind of aggregates that had the need for companionship? That raises a whole other question. Okay? In terms of how do we work with emotional needs, it depends on what the need is. Okay? I think Marshall Rosenberg in Nonviolent Communication suggests learning how to meet our own emotional needs. And I find that a very interesting thing. And when I think about it, I find that it is possible. And it also seems to me that many of the thought training teachings that we engage in can work to meet our emotional needs. And I come back to this thing that's attributed to Mother Teresa, when she says, when I feel lonely, give me somebody to love. So when you have that kind of metta or love that Venerable Sepal was talking about during the BBC today, that having that arise in your mind towards other beings can itself fulfill can fulfill us and alleviate the feelings of sadness and loneliness and alienation. Yeah. So I think learning how to generate different mental states within ourselves, then we can start to meet our own needs. Okay? Because the thing is, so often with our emotional needs, it feels like the only thing that could meet it is something external. Because we always feel that our happiness and suffering come from something external. Yeah. And if that were true, then there would never, ever be any way to feel content. Because there's no way in the world to get everything we want and avoid everything we don't like. That is impossible. Okay, so if the happiness really comes from outside, we are sunk. But if we can, generate good mental states inside, that can bring us a sense of peace and fulfillment and contentment. Yeah? Without reaching for something outside or pushing something else away. But that entails work on our part, or should I say practice. You don't have to work, you don't have to move a muscle, but we do have to move our mind. And sometimes that is harder than moving muscles, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.